On today's episode of Rags to Riches, we're interviewing Jeff Moffat of InsureForce West and telling his crazy story. We try to focus on not just the individual's wealth or where they've been able to get to, but how they got there, perceived glass ceilings they broke through, and the major challenges, trials, and tribulations along the way. Jeff, tell me a little bit about how you got started and growing up, what made you decide to get into this business? And I'm sure there was a time when you were just starting out and trying to make a sale and had no revenue in the bank, down to the last. Can I understand how that went for you?
My transition into the insurance industry was purely by accident, a tragedy. My father was killed when I was very young, doing a volunteer construction accident, and put my mom, myself, in total jeopardy, and my two sisters. We had no money. Over the years, we struggled like crazy, like what people would never even imagine, like collecting bottles to actually pay for the mortgage. And then we had a bit of a godsend. A few of the firemen and the hydro linemen took up a collection, paid our house off in 1969, which was $13,000. But even during those times, just to even get groceries and stuff, my mom never accepted any welfare or any of that. She instilled like a real strong work ethic in myself and my sisters. And at that point, we were all working early, all finished our school, and relatively all became successful in our own means and our own vocations. Getting into this business was, like I said, purely by accident. Being forced to be so poor at a young age really makes you focus on what other people sort of have and you don't have. So it was time to go. And by the time I was 26 years old, I was being fairly successful. And then I got, a little bit of an accident and laid me up for a bit. And I started investigating the insurance industry and found myself some niches. Started teaching, white collar tricks to blue collar guys. It's one of my favorite sayings, and it took off from there. But there was struggles. I mean, like I said, it's you work a lot of hours when you first start in any business. I don't care if you're opening a shoe store. You got to be putting the time in, because time is going to be your biggest asset when you get in any business.
Jeff, let me ask you about the childhood piece, because I'm always curious and envious of entrepreneurs who had the drive that I didn't at that age. I was a rich kid, and I grew up in a wealthy family with a successful dad. And I always wondered if growing up in that environment limited you for that hunger and that drive that other men had. So if I can just understand, or the listeners can understand, when you're growing up and you're having to use, collect bottles to pay groceries and pay rent, and you see the rich kid going down the street, you see the dad in the nice car, and you see the things that perceive that you don't have. Is that what ignites that fire and creates that drive? Is it the wanting something you don't have? Help me understand that.
So basically for me, it's like you even still get phases of that. When I was first growing up and had nothing, and I'd see somebody in a fancy car when I was 16 and I was driving a 68 four-door Valiant, that was my mom's car. Yeah, I used to get a little bit of jealous. I used to have some hate. But, as I started to struggle through with money and started doing some investing and investigating into things and started really being a workaholic in regards to get myself ahead, I really realized it's not the hate of other people. It's you're wanting to have what you want, and you shouldn't be guilty to have what you want to have as long as you're ethical and you don't hurt anybody while you're going after it. The strengths that I got come basically from my dad, who was, a Golden Glove boxer, my mom, worked and really put a lot of stress on us being good people. That was all like that. I mean, it was nothing that was ever pre-planned, but it happened. And so having a drive is having the things that you don't have. All my friends had things that I didn't have, like everybody, like from a young boy, I used to play with a stick as a gun. And, my best friend had like the Tommy gun, Avenger with the pistol that came out of the handle and fired the grenades. I didn't have that, but it didn't matter because someday I would.
Let me ask you something in that category. So you're 26 years old, you've gotten past a tough upbringing, but one of the things I've noticed about you in our conversations is the paramount fundamentals, in my opinion, of men: honor, respect, and integrity. And I was taught those things by my father and instilled by my father. There must have been a point in your young career, 18, 19, 20, 22, where you attached to, or someone took you under their wing and showed you how to be that person. Because I don't think you become honorable, respectful, integral just by doing business and coming up. You got to have those mentors.
Yeah,
am I right?
100%. And those mentors for me were my uncle and my cousin. And my dad was, only 33 when he was killed, and he was, teaching some hand-to-hand combat boxing skills to a new squad in the RCMP, which my cousin, who was only 19, big guy, was running. You know, my uncle Don, who was also high-powered RCMP, the day my dad was killed, they came to me, and they basically in 1969, I was crying in the backyard, holding on to my dad's sweater, and they said, "You can't cry no more." But that was a different time. Things have changed, but they taught me honor and respect, and yes sir, no sir, open the door. Get up off a chair when an elderly person comes in. They taught me those values, but my dad had taught me those values always when I was growing up. So they were the extension of it after he left. They filled in those spaces, but they were just like him.
So you found mentors, not just in business coming through, but you found mentors in your community.
Absolutely.
And you attached to men who you looked up to because they were respected.
Right.
Would you agree that that's an undervalued trait nowadays in young men coming up, is the importance of not only respecting other men, but earning respect yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see I got youngins now, and I've raised a couple of kids myself, and I have a couple of steps, all good guys, all working hard. But I do notice, with some of their friends or other people like nieces and nephews that are all doing fairly well, there's a different value now with young people. I don't think there's as much zest for success anymore. I don't think that people really are struggling with that, like trying to keep themselves fit and trying to be number one at a sport or whatever the case be. That thing has changed a bit. I'd like to see it come back more, where like there are mentorship programs where you can teach young men to be men again, because they're changing. The values have changed drastically, and I don't even like to use this word, but I do notice that a lot of men are more feminine now, right? It's not like that old school macho type, values and whatnot. But it's just a struggle, like, for people nowadays, because I think in a lot of ways, youngsters have too much, and everything is immediate. There's no really work intended to get something. If you want something, you buy it, or your folks do. Everybody else was driving these little Mustangs and fancy little cars and fancy haircuts and fancy suits. But I did realize that they weren't as strong as actually going for a work ethic. They'd had their college degrees. A lot of them came from, wealthy families, the guys that I first had to operate with, but they didn't know how to work. They never packed a lunch bucket. They never got up in the morning and go to work. They were now in this facility, and they were mostly operating off friends and family. I knew for a fact that if I did that in this industry, I would not be a success if I just had to count on my friends and family and relatives to do insurance with. So I started door knocking at a very young age. I started making phone calls like crazy, and one old guy told me, he said, until you've been told no 1,000 times, you won't be in this business. And the record speaks for itself. Not very many people last 2 years in this business. If you take 25 guys, you might see 2 last year in 25 years.
One of the most consistent themes we're seeing, to forward what you said, in interviewing successful entrepreneurs, and I can relate to this as well, is the fundamental importance of sales skills and marketing ability, specifically, excuse my language, the sack to go knock on doors and pick up calls. And
Totally.
That's where I learned it too, is making 1,000 cold calls. And maybe you're the same way. I'd love to hear how you feel about this, but I remember the bullpen, we call it, and there was a whole bunch of us producers. I was also in insurance on the general side before getting into this business. And there was so many of us, and there was MBAs, university graduates. Insurance was a rich man's game. I agree with you. Same thing on the general insurance side, selling property and casualty insurance. There's a lot of wealthy kids who have big university degrees. I wasn't smart enough for those degrees. And I'd gone to college or didn't have them. You had one choice. If you could work harder and sell more and make more calls and knock on more doors, you had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And did you find that that was the real separator from the other guys in the game, guys and gals in the game, was being able to work harder on the sales?
The sales thing was sort of, it came kind of natural to me in regards to, you played a lot of sports. You were always negotiating. You're always going through conflict resolution with a teammate on any sport. And I played tons of sports. But I learned at a very young age, just like in sports, hustle and grit will beat out talent and education any day.
Agreed.
And so that's where I used to be so nervous when I used to go into the office and everybody had these college degrees, until I was there a month and realized I was at the top of the heap because everybody else was being fake and I was being real. So I always try to keep it real. Try to, not everybody's going to like you, but you have to keep it real. Don't pull punches, and be stone cold honest with people, and they'll see through that. And they'll like the clients that I get, sometimes it shocks me, plastic surgeons to dentists to doctors, when really I'm a blue collar guy, but they all resonate with the truth, and they can tell the truth. And so many people in our industry are always trying to cut corners and to get to some place. Now there's a ton of good guys in our business, and I've had the opportunity to work with tons of them, and most of the ones that are successful all have this sort of same traits, with a little bit different spin, something that makes them shine a little more. But no, people never used to thought that I was an insurance guy, which was good for me, right? Because 99% of the rest of the folks that I worked with were little short, bald guys with glasses and briefcases, right? So yeah, it's been a fun time, and it's been very fun. Yeah, there's been struggles, but it's just part of life.
Absolutely. Would you agree that, and this is consistent as well with any of the successful entrepreneurs that I've been interviewing, is that there is a big gap in an understanding of the term relationship? And would you agree that your generation understands the value? And I'd like to dig into this in a second with a question about relationships. And the younger guys coming up don't seem to understand the importance of long-term partnerships and relationships. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a bit about how those long-term relationships and partnerships with, whether it's in your friendship circle or your business circle or clients, wherever, have really contributed to that next level wealth and success for the young guys who don't seem to understand the importance of relationship and business?
It's funny, like I've been doing this a long time, 35 years, but when you build relationships with people that you build trust with, and they like what you do, you're kind of going to be like McDonald's. You're never just going to do one piece of business. They're going to be back to buy another hamburger from you, and they're also going to refer somebody else to come to your restaurant and do business with you. So it's kind of funny. You just got to have the relationship, take care of them. This week alone, I've had 3 or 4 referrals. Guys will struggle to get referrals, but it's because they haven't done all the right jobs. They haven't done all the right pieces to the puzzle. They've tried to cut corners or whatnot. A lot of people like to do Zoom calls and stuff like that nowadays. Sure, that's great for time, but I'm still a belly-to-belly guy. I need to press the flesh, shake a hand if at all possible, and that's how you build relationships, like face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball.
Absolutely. For the 25 to 35, 40-year-old entrepreneur, or somebody in a leadership role, or someone who's starting a family or has a young family, and let's just say they're in the early 6 figures, mid 6 figures, and they're trying to get to a 7-figure income, what's the best advice you can give those men today?
I make it almost as a joke because, like I said, when you're a young entrepreneur, you get to work half days. 12 hours in the morning or 12 hours at night. You pick your choice. I would choose to do the mornings because most business guys are up and ready to get at it. Consistency, door knock, call, and just got to keep going. You just can't just shelf it and just wait for something to happen, because there's no magic out there. You make the magic happen yourself, and you've got to be at it all the time. You got to be that blue collar guy, packing your lunch, boots on the ground first thing in the morning, and working.
Okay, Jeff, can you teach us something about your business that everybody should know?
Yeah, I can. Like, if you're new in the business or you're a younger guy looking after daytime hours and wanting to work with corporations. Corporations nowadays, tax is the biggest thing, especially with the capital gain rise that has gone on. The first $500,000 that goes into a corporation is only taxed at 11%. If you've got properties that are gaining equity and accepting rents inside your corporation, that's a 50.2% tax. And now the capital gains tax is at 66.7% inside of a corporation. This is a very effective strategy that we use, and it's known as the IFA. How an IFA works is that, let me just draw you a few little diagram here. Here's your corp. Here's your shareholder. Key man. The corp buys a life insurance policy on the key man. They inject cash into it. We bring the bank in. The bank lends them back all the premium. We take the money, put it back in the corp. So now they've created a tax deduction for borrowing their own money. They've created life insurance for their loved ones and business partners. And they've got a tax deduction for borrowing their own money also. It's a great way to like avoid some tax, and there's no capital gains on these plans at all. Zero capital gains. So you're much further ahead inside of these policies. Current dividends run anywhere between 6 and 7% with most of the big companies. That's a great rate of return inside of a tax shelter. Simple.
Today's episode was brought to you by InsureForce West Services Limited, and we got a great chance to understand Jeff Moffat's internal process. Thanks so much for listening, following. Please like, share, and invite anybody else to come join this podcast, because we're looking for successful entrepreneurs to join the team. Thanks so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Appreciate that. Thank you very kindly, sir.
Absolutely.